Lisa had been teaching kids at the small school in Desert Valley for 3 long years. Every morning she would wake up in her tiny apartment and look at the bills piling up on her kitchen table. Being a teacher in this remote town was never easy, but lately things had gotten much worse. The school district was facing serious money problems. For the 3rd month in a row, her paycheck didn't come. The principal kept telling all the teachers that the money would arrive soon, but Lisa wasn't sure if she could believe that anymore. Her bank account was almost empty, and her landlord had already knocked on her door twice this week. "If you don't pay rent by Friday, you'll have to leave," he had said in a cold voice. Lisa knew he meant it. She had seen other people get kicked out of their homes in this small town when they couldn't pay. Walking to her classroom that Tuesday morning, Lisa tried to stay positive for her students. These kids meant everything to her. Many of them came from families that didn't have much money either. Some kids would come to school hungry, and Lisa often bought snacks with her own money to make sure they had something to eat. "Good morning, Miss Lisa," called out Tommy, a 7-year-old boy with a bright smile. His clothes were old and had holes in them, but his eyes always lit up when he saw her. "Good morning, Tommy. Did you have breakfast today?" Lisa asked, already knowing the answer. Tommy shook his head. Without thinking twice, Lisa reached into her bag and gave him the granola bar she had saved for her own lunch. She did this almost every day, even though she barely had enough food for herself. When school ended that day, Lisa went home and opened her refrigerator. Inside, she found only some crackers, a piece of stale bread, and an almost empty jar of peanut butter. Her stomach growled loudly. She hadn't eaten a proper meal in 2 days. That evening, she sat on her couch and counted the money in her wallet. $23. That was all she had left in the world. Her phone had been cut off last week because she couldn't pay the bill. Her car had broken down a month ago and she couldn't afford to fix it. Lisa felt tears running down her face. She had worked so hard to become a teacher. She remembered how excited she was when she first got this job. She thought she would be able to make a difference in these kids' lives while also taking care of herself. But now she felt like she was failing at everything. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about her students and how much they needed her. But she also knew that if she didn't find a way to make money soon, she would lose her apartment and wouldn't be able to teach anymore. The next morning, while walking to school, she overheard 2 men talking at the gas station. "Yeah, Johnson's Ranch is hiring workers for the summer," one man said. "They pay really good money, too. About $200 a day if you can handle the work." Lisa's ears perked up. $200 a day! That would be enough to pay her rent and buy food. She quietly moved closer to listen. "Where's this ranch?" the other man asked. "About 50 miles down Highway 87. It's a long drive, but worth it if you need work." Lisa's heart started beating faster. 50 miles wasn't that far. But then she remembered she didn't have a car. She didn't have money for gas or a bus ticket either. But maybe, just maybe, she could find another way. She spent the whole day at school thinking about it. During lunch break, she looked at a map on the classroom computer. Highway 87 was a straight road through the desert. It looked simple enough. People walked long distances all the time, right? After school, Lisa went to the small grocery store and asked the owner about the ranch. "Oh, you mean Old Man Wellington's place?" "Yeah, he's always looking for workers during busy season. Pays fair too, from what I hear. But honey, that's a long way to go without a car." "How long would it take to walk there?" Lisa asked, trying to sound casual. The store owner looked at her with concern. "Walk through the desert? That's dangerous, especially in this heat. You shouldn't even think about it." But Lisa was already thinking about it. In fact, she couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, she made a decision that would change her life forever. She would leave early the next morning and walk to the ranch. How hard could it be? She was young and strong. She had walked long distances before during college, and she was desperate enough to try anything. Lisa filled an old water bottle with tap water and packed the remaining crackers in her teacher bag. She wrote a note to the principal explaining that she had a family emergency and would be back in a few days. She didn't want to lie, but she also couldn't tell the truth. As she prepared for bed that night, Lisa looked around her small apartment. Tomorrow she would either find a solution to her problems or she didn't want to think about the other possibilities. She set her alarm for 4 a.m. The desert would be cooler in the early morning, and she wanted to cover as much distance as possible before the sun got too hot. Lisa didn't know that she was about to begin the most difficult 2 days of her life. She didn't know that this desperate decision would lead her to meet someone who would change everything. All she knew was that she had to try something, anything, to save herself and get back to the classroom where her students needed her. The next morning, as the first light appeared in the sky, Lisa locked her apartment door and started walking toward Highway 87. Behind her, she left her old life. Ahead of her was the unknown desert and a journey that would test every bit of strength she had. The morning air was still cool when Lisa started walking down Highway 87. She felt hopeful as she took her first steps into the desert. The sun was just coming up, painting the sky in beautiful colors of orange and pink. For a moment, she almost forgot about her troubles. "I can do this," she whispered to herself. "It's just a long walk." Lisa had put on her most comfortable shoes, a pair of old sneakers that she wore to school every day. They weren't perfect, but they were all she had. She carried her teacher bag over her shoulder with the crackers, her water bottle, and the $23 she owned. The first few hours felt good. Lisa walked at a steady pace, watching the desert landscape around her. She saw tall cactus plants, small lizards running across the road, and mountains in the distance. The air smelled clean and fresh. Occasionally a car or truck would drive by, but they were going fast and didn't seem to notice her. By 9 a.m., the sun was getting stronger. Lisa could feel the heat starting to build up. She took small sips from her water bottle, trying to make it last as long as possible. She had heard that you should drink water slowly in the desert, not all at once. Halfway there already, she told herself, even though she had only walked about 8 miles. She was starting to realize that 50 miles was much further than it seemed on the map. Around noon, the heat became serious. The sun felt like it was burning right through her clothes. The road ahead shimmered like water, but Lisa knew it was just the heat playing tricks with her eyes. Her shirt was soaked with sweat and her mouth was getting dry. She found a small shade under a large rock and sat down to rest. When she checked her water bottle, her heart sank. It was already half empty, and she still had a very long way to go. Lisa tried to eat one of her crackers, but her mouth was too dry. The cracker felt like sand. A big truck rumbled past, kicking up dust that made Lisa cough. She waved at the driver, hoping he might stop, but the truck kept going. The dust settled on her sweaty skin, making her feel even more uncomfortable. Maybe someone will give me a ride, she thought. People are usually kind to teachers. But as the afternoon went on, more cars passed without stopping. Some drivers didn't even seem to see her. Others looked at her strangely. A woman walking alone in the desert didn't look normal. It looked dangerous. By 3 p.m., Lisa was in trouble. The desert heat was now over 110 degrees, and her water bottle was almost empty. Her head was starting to hurt, and she felt dizzy when she stood up. But she kept walking because she didn't know what else to do. Her feet were getting sore inside her shoes. She could feel blisters forming, but she tried to ignore the pain. Every step hurt a little more than the last one. Just keep walking, she told herself. Just keep walking. The desert seemed to go on forever. The mountains that looked close in the morning still seemed far away. Lisa started to understand why the store owner had looked so worried when she asked about walking to the ranch. Around 5 p.m., she finished the last drop of water in her bottle. Her throat felt like sandpaper and her lips were starting to crack. She kept looking for any sign of water, maybe a gas station or a rest stop, but there was nothing. Just endless desert and the long, straight road. As the sun started to go down, Lisa realized she would have to spend the night in the desert. This thought scared her more than anything else. She had never spent a night outside, especially not alone in the wilderness. She found another large rock to sit behind, hoping it would protect her from the wind. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped quickly. Lisa was surprised at how cold the desert became at night. She was shivering in the same place where she had been sweating just hours before. Strange sounds came from the darkness. Coyotes howling in the distance, the rustling of small animals moving through the brush. Every sound made Lisa's heart beat faster. She clutched her bag tightly and tried to stay awake, afraid that something might happen if she fell asleep. The stars in the desert sky were brighter than any she had ever seen. Under different circumstances, she might have thought they were beautiful. But now they just reminded her of how alone and far from home she was. Lisa's stomach cramped with hunger, but she was saving her last few crackers for the morning. She tried to lick her lips, but her tongue was dry too. She had never been so thirsty in her entire life. As she sat shivering behind the rock, Lisa thought about her students. Were they wondering where she was? Did the principal find her note? She imagined Tommy asking where Miss Lisa was, and it made her want to cry, but she was too dehydrated even for tears. "I have to make it," she whispered into the cold desert air. "Those kids need me." When the first light of dawn appeared, Lisa had only slept for about an hour. She was stiff, sore, and more thirsty than ever. Her lips were cracked and bleeding slightly. Her feet hurt so much that she could barely put her shoes back on, but she stood up and started walking again. She had no choice. Going back was just as far as going forward now, and at least forward led to the ranch where she might find work. Lisa didn't know that this second day would be even harder than the first. She didn't know that her body was already in serious danger from dehydration. All she knew was that she had to keep putting one foot in front of the other, no matter how much it hurt. The morning sun came up fast, and soon the desert heat was building again. Lisa walked like a robot, not really thinking anymore, just moving forward because stopping felt like giving up completely. As darkness began to fall on Lisa's first day in the desert, she realized that her situation was becoming very serious. She had walked for almost 12 hours, but she had only covered about 12 miles. Her math wasn't good. At this rate, it would take her more than 4 days to reach the ranch. She didn't have enough water for 4 hours, let alone 4 days. Lisa looked around for a place to spend the night. The desert looked completely different in the fading light. Shadows grew long and dark, and the friendly morning landscape now seemed threatening and dangerous. She found a large boulder that was taller than she was and decided to rest behind it. The rock still held heat from the day, which felt good at first. Lisa leaned against it and tried to get comfortable. Her whole body ached. Her feet were on fire inside her shoes, and she was afraid to take them off because she might not be able to get them back on if her feet swelled up. As the last light disappeared, the desert became a completely different world. During the day it had been hot and bright. Now it was cold and full of strange sounds. Lisa had never realized how noisy the desert could be at night. She heard rustling in the bushes nearby, small animals moving around looking for food or water. In the distance, coyotes began their nightly howling. The sound sent chills down Lisa's spine. She had heard coyotes before from her apartment, but they had never sounded so close or so real. "They're probably more afraid of me than I am of them," she whispered to herself, but she didn't really believe it. Lisa wrapped her arms around her knees and tried to stay warm. The temperature was dropping fast. She couldn't believe that the same place that had been over 110 degrees a few hours ago was now making her shiver. She wished she had brought a jacket, but she hadn't thought about desert nights when she was planning this trip. Her stomach growled loudly. The sound seemed extra loud in the quiet desert. Lisa reached into her bag and pulled out one of her crackers. She tried to eat it slowly to make it last longer, but her mouth was so dry that it was hard to swallow. The cracker felt like eating cardboard. As the night went on, Lisa became more and more cold. She tried walking around the rock to warm up, but that made her even more tired. She tried doing jumping jacks, but she was too weak. Finally, she just sat back down and tried to survive until morning. The cold wasn't the only problem. Lisa was getting very scared. Every sound in the darkness made her imagine dangerous animals coming closer. She had heard stories about mountain lions in this area. What if one of them smelled her and came looking? Around midnight, Lisa heard something that made her heart stop. Footsteps. Not animal footsteps, human footsteps. Someone was walking around her rock. "Hello?" she called out, her voice shaky and weak. The footsteps stopped, then started again, closer this time. "Is someone there?" Lisa tried to make her voice sound stronger, but it came out as a whisper. More footsteps, but they seemed to be moving away now. Lisa waited for what felt like hours, listening carefully. Finally, she realized that the footsteps had probably been in her imagination. When people get very thirsty and tired, their minds start playing tricks on them. But the experience left her even more frightened. Lisa started talking to herself just to hear a human voice. "You're okay, Lisa, you're going to be okay. Just make it through the night and tomorrow you'll get to the ranch. Someone there will help you." She tried to think about good things to keep her mind off the cold and fear. She thought about her classroom and how happy her students always looked when they learned something new. She remembered the time Tommy had finally learned to read a whole book by himself, and how proud he had been. "I'm doing this for them," she said out loud. "They need me to come back." But as the hours passed, Lisa began to wonder if she would ever see her students again. She was getting weaker by the hour. Her lips were cracking and her throat hurt every time she swallowed. She had never been so thirsty in her life. Around 3 a.m., Lisa noticed something strange. The rocks and bushes around her were covered with tiny drops of water. Dew. She had learned about this in science class years ago. When the air cools down at night, moisture forms on cold surfaces. Lisa got excited and tried to collect the dew. She used her fingers to wipe it off the rocks and then licked her fingers. It wasn't much water, just a few drops, but it was something. She took off her shirt and tried to soak up more dew, then wrung it out into her mouth. She probably got less than a teaspoon of water this way, but it felt like a miracle. "I'm smarter than I thought," Lisa said, feeling a little bit proud. Her science education was actually helping her survive. As dawn began to break, Lisa felt a mixture of relief and dread. She was happy to have survived the night, but she knew that the new day would bring the terrible heat again, and she was much weaker now than she had been yesterday morning. Her body was starting to show serious signs of dehydration. Her skin felt dry and tight. When she pinched the skin on her hand, it stayed pinched for several seconds instead of bouncing back. She had learned about this in her first aid training. It was a bad sign. Lisa's feet were in terrible condition. When she finally took off her shoes to check, she saw that she had large blisters on both heels and several toes. Some of them had already popped and were raw and bloody. Putting her shoes back on was incredibly painful, but she had to keep walking. Lisa knew that staying in one place meant dying in the desert. Her only chance was to keep moving toward the ranch and hope that someone would find her, or that she would find help. As the sun came up, painting the desert in beautiful morning colors again, Lisa stood up slowly. Every part of her body protested. Her legs were shaky, her head was pounding, and her vision was starting to get blurry around the edges. "Just one more day," she told herself. "I can do anything for one more day." But deep down, Lisa was starting to understand that she might not make it to the ranch. She was in serious danger, and she was still more than 30 miles away from help. The second day in the desert was about to begin, and it would test her in ways she never imagined possible. The second day started badly and got much worse. Lisa could barely stand up when the sun rose. Her legs felt like jelly and her head was spinning. She had to lean against the rock for several minutes before she felt steady enough to start walking. Within an hour of starting to walk, Lisa knew she was in serious trouble. Her body was shutting down from lack of water. Every step was a struggle, and she had to stop and rest every few minutes. But the worst part was what was happening to her mind. At first, it was just little things. Lisa thought she saw a car coming toward her, but when she waved and called out, there was nothing there. Just empty road and heat waves rising from the pavement. "I'm imagining things," she said to herself. "That's normal when you're thirsty." But as the morning went on, the hallucinations got stronger and more real. Lisa started seeing pools of crystal clear water beside the road. They looked so real that she would stumble off the highway toward them, only to find dry sand and rocks. "Water. There's water right there," she would shout, pointing at nothing. Each time this happened, Lisa felt more confused and frustrated. She knew the water wasn't real, but her brain kept showing it to her anyway. It was like being trapped in a dream where you know you're dreaming but can't wake up. Around noon, when the heat was at its worst, Lisa started seeing people. First, she saw a man in a cowboy hat walking beside her. "Are you going to the ranch too?" she asked him. The man didn't answer, and when Lisa turned to look at him directly, he disappeared. Then she saw a woman with a baby sitting under a tree that wasn't there. "Excuse me," Lisa called out. "Do you have any water?" But when she walked toward them, there was nothing but empty desert. The strangest thing was that Lisa started having conversations with people who weren't there. She began talking to her students as if they were walking with her. "Tommy, you need to practice your reading every day," she said to the empty air. "Reading will take you places you've never been." "Yes, Miss Lisa," she heard Tommy's voice answer back. Even though she knew he wasn't really there, "Katie, remember what I told you about being kind to the new students," Lisa continued, talking to another imaginary student. These conversations felt completely real to Lisa. She could hear her students' voices clearly, and she could see their faces. For a while, having these imaginary friends made her feel less alone and scared. But the hallucinations also made it harder for Lisa to focus on reality. She would stop walking to answer questions from students who weren't there. She would try to share her imaginary water with imaginary children. A truck driver named Pete was driving down Highway 87 that afternoon. Later, he would tell people about the strange thing he saw. There was this woman walking in the desert, Pete said. At first, I thought maybe her car had broken down. But as I got closer, I could see she was talking to herself and pointing at things that weren't there. It was like she was having a party with invisible people. Pete slowed down his truck, thinking about stopping to help. But something about the way the woman was acting scared him. She seemed out of her mind, and Pete didn't know if it was safe to approach her. By the time he decided to stop, he had driven past her and would have had to back up on the highway, which was dangerous. I still feel bad about not stopping, Pete said later, but she looked like she might be on drugs or something. You never know these days. Other drivers saw Lisa too, but they all had similar reactions. A woman walking alone in the desert, talking to invisible people and stumbling around, looked dangerous or crazy. None of them stopped to help. Lisa had no idea that people were seeing her and choosing not to help. In her confused state, she thought she was having wonderful conversations with her students and making good progress toward the ranch. "We're doing great, kids," she told her imaginary class. "Just a little bit further and we'll all be safe." As the afternoon wore on, Lisa's hallucinations became even more vivid. She started seeing her old classroom in the desert. There were the familiar desks, the colorful posters on the walls, and the bookshelf where she kept all the stories. "Time for math class," Lisa announced to the empty desert. She sat down on the hot pavement as if it were her teacher's chair. "Today we're going to learn about addition," she continued, talking to students who existed only in her dehydrated mind. "If I have 2 crackers and you have 3 crackers, how many crackers do we have together?" Lisa waited for an answer, nodding as if she could hear her students responding. "That's right, Tommy. 5 crackers. You're getting so good at math." What Lisa didn't realize was that her body was in critical condition. She had lost more than 15 pounds in just 2 days. Her kidneys were struggling to function without water. Her blood was getting thick and hard for her heart to pump. But her mind was protecting her from the worst of the fear and pain by creating these comforting hallucinations. In her confused state, Lisa felt like she was surrounded by the people she loved most, her students. "Miss Lisa, when are we going home?" asked an imaginary voice. "Soon, sweetie," Lisa answered. "We just have to walk a little bit more." As the sun started to go down on her second day, Lisa was still talking to her invisible students. She was moving very slowly now, sometimes crawling when walking became too difficult. "Don't worry, kids," she whispered. "Teacher won't let anything bad happen to you." But Lisa was dying. Her body was shutting down, and she probably had only a few hours left before she would collapse completely. She needed help soon, or her story would end here in the desert. What Lisa didn't know was that help was coming. A rancher was about to drive down this same road, and he would see something that would make him stop his truck and change both of their lives forever. Robert Wellington had been checking his ranch's water wells for over 20 years, and he knew every mile of Highway 87 like the back of his hand. At 62 years old, he was a successful cattle rancher who owned thousands of acres of desert land. His friends called him a tough businessman, but fair and honest. That Wednesday afternoon, Robert was driving his pickup truck to check on the furthest water well on his property. It had been a dry summer, and he needed to make sure all his cattle had enough water to drink. As he drove down the familiar highway, he was thinking about cattle prices and whether he should sell some of his herd early this year. Around 4 p.m., Robert saw something unusual up ahead on the right side of the road. At first, it looked like a pile of old clothes that someone had thrown out of their car. This happened sometimes. People would dump trash in the desert because they thought no one would notice. "Damn litter bugs," Robert muttered to himself. He was always annoyed by people who treated his beautiful desert like a garbage dump. But as he got closer, something about the pile didn't look right. Robert had good eyes, even at his age, and he could see that the clothes seemed to have a shape to them. Like maybe there was still a person inside. Robert slowed down his truck and pulled over to the side of the road. He got out and walked toward what he had seen. As he came closer, his heart started beating faster. It wasn't a pile of clothes at all. It was a woman lying very still beside the highway. "Oh my God," Robert said out loud. The woman was lying on her side, curled up like she was trying to stay warm. Her clothes were dirty and torn. Her hair was tangled and full of dust. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, and her skin looked gray and dry. Robert knelt down beside her and gently touched her shoulder. Miss, can you hear me?" Lisa's eyes opened slowly. At first, she didn't seem to see Robert at all. She was looking past him at something that wasn't there. "The children need to get on the bus now," Lisa whispered in a weak voice. "Make sure they have their backpacks." Robert realized immediately that this woman was severely dehydrated and probably hallucinating. He had seen cattle in similar condition during bad droughts, and he knew how dangerous it was. "What's your name, miss?" Robert asked gently. "What are you doing out here?" "Parent-teacher conferences are next week," Lisa mumbled. "I need to call all the parents. Do you have the phone numbers?" Lisa tried to sit up, but she was too weak. Robert could see that she was in critical condition. Her skin was hot and dry, and when he lifted her wrist to check her pulse, it was racing much too fast. Robert had lived in the desert his whole life, and he knew the signs of severe heat exhaustion. This woman was dying. If he hadn't found her, she probably wouldn't have lasted another hour. "Don't worry, miss. I'm going to help you," Robert said in his calmest voice. "I'm going to take you somewhere safe." Very carefully, Robert lifted Lisa in his arms. She was much lighter than he expected, probably 30 pounds lighter than she should have been. As he carried her to his truck, she kept talking about her students and her classroom. "The kids are waiting for me," Lisa whispered. "I can't be late. They depend on me." Robert gently placed Lisa in the passenger seat of his air-conditioned truck. The cool air hit her face, and for a moment her eyes seemed to focus on him. "Are you an angel?" Lisa asked. "No, miss. I'm just a rancher. My name is Robert." "What's your name?" "Lisa," she whispered. "I'm a teacher. I teach second grade." As Robert started driving toward town, he called the hospital on his truck's radio. "This is Robert Wellington. I'm bringing in a woman with severe dehydration. She's been in the desert for days by the look of it. Have someone ready?" The nurse on the radio asked. "How far out are you?" "About 40 minutes. And hurry, she's in bad shape." As they drove, Lisa drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she would talk clearly to Robert, and other times she would have conversations with invisible students. Robert kept talking to her, trying to keep her awake. "Why were you walking in the desert, Lisa?" Robert asked. "Had to get to the ranch," Lisa mumbled. "Need work. Kids need me to come back." "What kids?" "Your children." "My students. They're hungry. I buy them food with my own money, but I don't have any money left." Robert felt his heart break a little. This woman had been walking through the desert to find work so she could help her students? He had never heard of such dedication. "The school doesn't pay me enough," Lisa continued, her voice getting weaker. "But the kids, they're so special. Tommy is learning to read. Katie draws me pictures every day." Robert drove faster but carefully. He could see that Lisa was getting worse. Her breathing was shallow and her skin was getting even more gray. "Stay with me, Lisa," Robert said firmly. "We're almost there." "Will you tell my students that I tried?" Lisa whispered. "Tell them Miss Lisa tried to come back." "You're going to tell them yourself," Robert said. "You're going to be fine." But Robert wasn't sure that was true. He had seen people die from dehydration before, and Lisa looked very close to that point. He pressed the gas pedal a little harder. As they reached the outskirts of town, Robert looked at this brave woman beside him and made a decision that would change both of their lives. He didn't know her full story yet, but he already knew that anyone willing to walk through the desert to help children was someone special. "Don't you worry about anything, Lisa," Robert said quietly. "I'm going to make sure you're taken care of." The hospital was just ahead, and Robert could see the emergency team waiting outside. Lisa had been saved, but her real journey was just beginning. The emergency room at Desert Regional Medical Center had seen many cases of heat exhaustion over the years, but Lisa's condition was one of the worst the doctors had ever encountered. When Robert carried her through the doors, the medical team immediately went to work. Dr. Martinez, the emergency room doctor, took one look at Lisa and knew she was in critical condition. "Get her on IV fluids immediately," she ordered the nurses. "Check her temperature, blood pressure, and kidney function. This woman is severely dehydrated." They hooked Lisa up to machines that beeped and hummed. Tubes went into her arms to give her body the water and nutrients it desperately needed. Her temperature was dangerously high, and her kidneys were barely working. "She's lost about 15 pounds in just 2 days," Dr. Martinez told Robert. "A few more hours in that desert and we would have been too late." Robert sat in the waiting room, still thinking about what Lisa had said in the truck. A teacher walking through the desert to find work so she could help her students? It didn't seem possible, but her words had been so sincere. For 3 days, Lisa drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she would wake up confused, not knowing where she was. Other times she would talk about her students as if they were in the hospital room with her. Robert visited every day. He couldn't explain why, but he felt connected to this brave woman. Maybe it was because his late wife had also been a teacher. Maybe it was because he admired anyone with that kind of courage and dedication. On the 4th day, Lisa finally woke up completely. Her mind was clear for the first time since her rescue. She looked around the hospital room, confused and scared. "Where am I?" she asked the nurse. "You're in the hospital, honey. You're safe now. A man named Robert found you in the desert and saved your life." Lisa's memory slowly came back. The walk, the heat, the thirst. She felt embarrassed and ashamed. How could she have been so stupid? "I need to get back to work," Lisa said, trying to sit up. "My students need me." "How long have I been here?" 4 days, the nurse said gently. "And you're not going anywhere for a while. Your body needs time to recover." When Robert came to visit that afternoon, Lisa was sitting up in bed, looking much better but very embarrassed. "I'm so sorry you had to rescue me," Lisa said, her face red with shame. "I know I must have looked crazy out there. Thank you for saving my life." Robert pulled a chair up beside her bed. "Don't apologize. I'm just glad I found you in time. But I have to ask, why were you walking through the desert?" Lisa looked down at her hands. She felt stupid for putting herself in such danger. "I needed work. I heard there was a ranch hiring and I couldn't afford gas or a bus ticket. You risked your life for a job?" "Not just any job," Lisa said quietly. "I'm a teacher at the elementary school in Desert Valley. The school district hasn't paid us in 3 months. I was about to lose my apartment and I couldn't even afford food." Robert frowned. "But surely there are other jobs closer to home." Lisa shook her head. "In Desert Valley? There's nothing. And I couldn't leave my students, these kids. Many of them come from families that don't have much. Some days I'm the only person who tells them they're smart and special. I buy food for the hungry ones with my own money. Even when you don't have money yourself?" "Especially then," Lisa said. "Kids shouldn't have to worry about being hungry at school. They should be thinking about learning and growing." Robert sat quietly for a moment, amazed by what he was hearing. This woman had nearly died trying to find work so she could continue helping children who weren't even her own. "Tell me about your students," Robert said. Lisa's face lit up for the first time since she had been in the hospital. "Oh, they're wonderful. There's Tommy. He struggled with reading for months, but he never gave up. Last month he read his first whole book by himself. And Katie draws me pictures every day. She wants to be an artist when she grows up." As Lisa talked about her students, Robert could see the love and passion in her eyes. She described each child like they were her own family. She knew their dreams, their struggles, their favorite subjects. "How long have you been teaching?" Robert asked. 3 years in Desert Valley. But I've wanted to be a teacher since I was 7 years old. My 2nd grade teacher, Mrs. Johnson, changed my life. She made me believe I was smart enough to do anything." Robert was quiet for a long time, thinking. Finally, he said, "Lisa, can I ask you something? If money wasn't a problem, what would you do for those kids?" Lisa's eyes got dreamy. "Everything. I'd make sure none of them ever went hungry. I'd buy them all the books and supplies they need. I'd start programs to help them with homework after school. I'd help the smart ones apply for college scholarships when they get older. What about the other schools in the area? Do they have the same problems?" "All the rural schools do. Not enough money, not enough supplies, not enough support for the kids who need it most." Robert nodded slowly. He was beginning to form an idea, but he wanted to know more about Lisa first. Over the next few days, as Lisa recovered, Robert visited often. He learned that she had grown up poor herself and had worked 3 jobs to pay for college. She had student loans she was still paying off. She lived in a tiny apartment and drove an old car that had broken down. But despite all her struggles, Lisa never complained. She only talked about her students and how much she wanted to help them succeed. What impressed Robert most was Lisa's intelligence and kindness. She was well-educated, thoughtful, and had more ideas about helping children than anyone he had ever met. On Lisa's last day in the hospital, Robert came to visit with a serious expression on his face. "Lisa, I have something to tell you, and then I have something to ask you." Lisa looked at him curiously. "My wife died 5 years ago. Before she passed, she always talked about using our money to help children get better educations. We never had kids of our own, but she believed that education was the most important gift we could give to the next generation. Robert paused, then continued. I've been thinking about what you said, about helping kids in rural schools. I want to start a foundation in my wife's memory, and I want you to help me run it. Lisa stared at him in shock. I don't understand. I'm offering you a job, Lisa, a real job with a good salary. You'd help me figure out how to use my money to help kids like yours, and you could keep teaching too if you wanted. Lisa felt tears in her eyes. Why would you do this for me? Robert smiled. Because anyone brave enough to walk through the desert to help children is exactly the kind of person my wife would have wanted to work with. Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. After everything she had been through, this kind rancher was offering her a chance to help children on a scale she had never imagined possible. But she was also scared. This was too good to be true, wasn't it? I don't know anything about running a foundation, Lisa said honestly. I'm just a school teacher, Robert smiled. That's exactly why I need you. I know about business and money, but I don't know about kids and education. You do. Over the next week, as Lisa finished recovering, Robert told her more about his idea. His ranch was very successful and he had more money than he could ever spend. His wife Margaret had always dreamed of helping children, especially in rural areas where resources were limited. Margaret grew up poor, just like you, Robert explained. She always said that if we were blessed with wealth, we should use it to help kids who remind us of ourselves. Robert took Lisa to see his ranch. It was enormous. Thousands of acres of beautiful desert land with mountains in the distance. His house was large but simple, filled with pictures of him and Margaret traveling the world together. We were married for 35 years, Robert said, looking at a photo of his wife. She was a teacher too before we got married. She always regretted giving up teaching, but back then, ranch wives didn't work outside the home. Lisa could see the love in Robert's eyes when he talked about Margaret. She understood why he wanted to honor his wife's memory by helping children. Tell me more about your students, Robert said as they sat on his porch, looking out over the desert where he had found her just 2 weeks earlier. Lisa's face lit up as she always did when talking about her kids. Well, there's Tommy. His dad left when he was little, and his mom works 2 jobs just to pay rent. Tommy is so smart, but he comes to school hungry most days. I started keeping granola bars in my desk just for him. What about the other kids? Katie's parents don't speak much English, so they can't help her with homework. But she's incredibly artistic. She draws pictures of her family in Mexico that make me want to cry. And there's Miguel. He's probably gifted, but there's no program for advanced students at our school. As Lisa talked, Robert took notes. He wanted to understand exactly what these children needed. What would help Tommy the most? Robert asked. Food security, and maybe tutoring after school. His mom can't afford daycare, so he goes home to an empty house every day. And Katie? Art supplies and maybe an English tutor for her parents. They want to help her succeed, but they feel helpless because of the language barrier. What about Miguel? Advanced books and challenges. Maybe the chance to take online courses with other gifted kids. And definitely college preparation when he gets older. Robert was amazed by how well Lisa knew each child's specific needs. She didn't just see them as students. She saw them as individual people with unique challenges and dreams. How many kids like this are in your class? Robert asked. All of them, Lisa said simply. 23 kids, and every single one has obstacles that could keep them from reaching their potential. And in the other rural schools around here? Hundreds of kids, maybe thousands. Rural schools always get less funding than city schools, but the kids are just as smart and just as deserving. That night, Robert couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what Lisa had told him. All his life, he had focused on building his ranch and making money. He had been successful beyond his wildest dreams. But what was the point of all that success if he didn't use it to help others? The next morning, Robert called his lawyer and accountant. He wanted to set up a foundation immediately. The Margaret Wellington Foundation for Rural Education. How much money are we talking about? His accountant asked. Start with $5 million, Robert said. We can add more later if needed. When Robert told Lisa about the foundation, she was overwhelmed. $5 million? She had never even seen that much money, let alone had the chance to spend it on helping children. I want you to be the director, Robert said. You'll decide how we spend the money. I'll handle the business side, but you'll make the educational decisions. What if I make mistakes? Lisa asked, feeling scared by the responsibility. Then we'll learn from them and do better next time, Robert said. Margaret always said that the biggest mistake is not trying to help at all. Lisa's first suggestion was to start small, with her own school. Let's see what works there and then expand to other schools. Robert agreed. What do you want to do first? Food, Lisa said immediately. No child should have to worry about being hungry at school. Let's start a breakfast and lunch program for any kid who needs it. Within a week, the foundation had arranged for free breakfast and lunch for every student at Desert Valley Elementary School. Lisa cried the first morning when she saw Tommy get a full breakfast with eggs, toast, and orange juice. Miss Lisa, look how much food there is, Tommy said with a huge smile. But the food was just the beginning. Lisa had ideas for after-school tutoring, art programs, college preparation classes, and support for families. Robert was amazed by her creativity and passion. I never realized how many ways there are to help children, Robert admitted. I thought you just gave them books and told them to study. Every child is different, Lisa explained. Some need food, some need confidence, some need challenges, some need emotional support. Our job is to figure out what each kid needs and find a way to provide it. As word spread about the foundation, other teachers started contacting Lisa. Rural schools all over the state were facing similar problems, and they wanted help too. We're going to need more money, Lisa told Robert. Robert smiled. Then we'll get more money. This is the most important work I've ever done. What had started as a rancher rescuing a desperate teacher was becoming something much bigger. Lisa and Robert were building a partnership that would change thousands of young lives. And they were just getting started. 6 months after Robert found Lisa dying in the desert, the Margaret Wellington Foundation for Rural Education had transformed from a simple idea into a powerful force for change. What started as one rancher's desire to honor his late wife had become something that was changing thousands of lives across the region. Lisa still taught her second-grade class every morning, but now her afternoons were spent running the foundation. Her tiny apartment had been replaced by a comfortable house near the school, and her broken-down car was now a reliable vehicle that could take her to visit schools across 3 counties. But the biggest change wasn't in Lisa's living situation, it was in her students' lives. Tommy no longer came to school hungry. Every morning he ate a hot breakfast in the school cafeteria, and every afternoon he stayed for the new tutoring program. His reading skills had improved dramatically, and he was now one of the top students in his class. Miss Lisa, I read 3 whole books this week, Tommy announced proudly, showing her a stack of chapter books. That's wonderful, Tommy. What was your favorite? The one about the boy who went on adventures. Someday I want to go on adventures too, but I want to come back and help other kids like you do. Katie was thriving in the new art program. The foundation had hired a part-time art teacher who came to the school twice a week. Katie's drawings were now displayed proudly in the school hallway, and she had started teaching other kids how to draw. Her parents had also joined the English classes that the foundation offered for families. Now they could help Katie with her homework and communicate better with her teachers. Miguel was taking advanced online courses through a program the foundation had created with the state university. Even though he was only in 2nd grade, he was already doing 4th grade math. Lisa had arranged for him to have a special mentor, a college professor who worked with gifted children. I want to be a scientist, Miguel told Lisa. And maybe a teacher too, like you. The success at Desert Valley Elementary School had attracted attention from other rural schools. The foundation was now working with 15 different schools across the region, providing food programs, tutoring, art classes, and family support services. Robert had never been happier. At 62 years old, he had found a purpose that went far beyond making money. He spent his days visiting schools, meeting with teachers, and watching children discover their potential. You know what amazes me most? Robert told Lisa one day as they drove back from visiting a school in a neighboring county. It's not just how much the kids have changed, it's how much the whole communities have changed. Lisa knew what he meant. When children started succeeding in school, it gave hope to entire families. Parents who had dropped out of high school were now taking GED classes offered through the foundation. Older siblings were staying in school instead of dropping out to work. The foundation had also created something unexpected: jobs. They had hired dozens of local people as tutors, family liaisons, and program coordinators. Many of these were people who had been struggling to find work in the rural economy. One of Lisa's proudest achievements was the scholarship program. The foundation was now providing college scholarships for students who graduated from the rural schools they supported. The first group of recipients would be starting college in the fall. "These kids are going to come back and change their communities," Lisa told Robert. "We're not just helping them. We're helping their future children and grandchildren too." Robert had also changed in ways he never expected. Before meeting Lisa, he had been a quiet, somewhat lonely man who focused mainly on his ranch. Now he was actively involved in education policy, speaking at conferences and encouraging other wealthy people to invest in rural education. "My wife would be so proud," Robert often said. "This is exactly what she dreamed of doing." The local newspaper had written several articles about the foundation, and the story had been picked up by larger papers across the state. People were fascinated by the story of the rancher and the teacher, who had formed such an unlikely but successful partnership. But for Lisa and Robert, the real success was measured in much simpler terms. It was Tommy reading above grade level. It was Katie's confidence growing with every art project. It was Miguel's excitement about science. It was parents who could now help their children with homework. One evening, as Lisa and Robert sat on his porch watching the sunset over the desert, Lisa reflected on how much her life had changed. "A year ago, I was walking through this desert thinking my life was over," she said. "I thought I was a failure who couldn't even take care of herself, let alone help anyone else." "And now?" Robert asked. "Now I understand that sometimes our worst moments lead to our best opportunities. If I hadn't been desperate enough to make that walk, we never would have met. These kids never would have gotten the help they needed." Robert nodded. "Margaret used to say that everything happens for a reason. I never really believed that until now." As the stars came out over the desert, Lisa thought about all the children who were sleeping peacefully tonight, well-fed and excited about school tomorrow. She thought about the teenagers who were making plans for college instead of dropping out. She thought about the families who had hope for the first time in years. "We're just getting started," Lisa said. "There are so many more kids who need help." Robert smiled. "Then we'll help them. We have the rest of our lives to make a difference." The desert that had nearly killed Lisa had become the place where she found her true calling. The rancher who had saved her life had become not just a partner, but a dear friend who shared her passion for helping children. Together, they had created something beautiful from something desperate. They had proven that when people with good hearts and the courage to act find each other, there's no limit to the positive change they can create. And in schools across the region, children who might have been forgotten were now thriving, dreaming big dreams, and preparing to change the world, all because a starving teacher had been brave enough to walk into the desert, and a kind rancher had been wise enough to stop his truck and offer help. The Margaret Wellington Foundation continued to grow, touching more lives each year. But for Lisa and Robert, the greatest reward was always the same: seeing a child's face light up with hope and possibility. That was worth more than all the money in the world.